The wind howls through the twisted skeletal trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like clawed fingers against the darkened sky. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decayed leaves, a scent that clings to the night like a whispered warning. The cemetery lies in the heart of nowhere. Forgotten by time, its tombstones cracked and crumbling under the weight of centuries. Some lean awkwardly as if trying to pull themselves from the soil, while others are half buried, lost to the creeping grip of nature. The iron gate at the entrance sways with a slow, agonizing creak, rusted by years of neglect, as if groaning in protest against any who dare to enter. Beyond the gate, the shadows are endless. The dim glow of the moon barely illuminates the jagged gravestones, leaving the pathways lost in darkness. The silence is unsettling, yet it is not complete. Listen closely, and you might hear it. The faintest whisper carried on the wind. A voice, a warning, or just the trees murmuring secrets to the night. And then, there's the legend. They say that deep within this graveyard, beyond the oldest stones where the names have long since faded, there is one grave that never stays silent. A grave where the dirt shifts on its own. A grave where, on certain nights, if you listen carefully, you can hear something scratching from underneath, but no one dares to listen. No one dares to stay long enough to find out. After all, some places are best left undisturbed, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. There's a saying in their town, don't go near Blackwood Cemetery after midnight. Most people treat it as nothing more than an old wives' tale, something parents tell their kids to keep them from wandering too far into the darkness. But for Jake Carter, it was just another stupid urban legend, and he wasn't the kind of guy who scared easily. At 17, Jake was the kind of kid who always had to prove himself. Tall, lean, always wearing that confident smirk that made people think nothing ever got under his skin. But deep down, he hated being called a coward. And tonight, he was about to prove to his friends, Ethan, Sam, and Chris, that there was nothing to fear in Blackwood Cemetery. They had gathered at the cemetery gates, the metal cold to the touch, rusted with time. It was past midnight. A full moon hung overhead, casting long, eerie shadows across the graveyard. Ethan: all right, Jake, let's see how brave you really are. Sam: dude, you know about the grave, right? Chris: oh yeah, the one that whispers, the one where people hear scratching? Jake: you guys seriously believe that crap? Ethan: then prove it. Go in alone. Just walk through the cemetery, touch the big angel statue in the middle, and come back. Easy. Jake: that's it? That's the challenge? Sam: unless you're scared. Jake: fine. Watch and learn, boys. His friends snickered as he pushed open the creaking gate and stepped inside. They stayed back, watching from the entrance, their flashlights barely cutting through the darkness. As Jake walked deeper into the graveyard, the laughter behind him faded. The air was different inside. He felt it almost immediately. Thicker, heavier. The further he went, the colder it became. The tombstones, some standing tall and others cracked with age, cast long, eerie shadows under the dim moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. A branch snapped under his foot. He could still hear his friends talking softly behind him, but their voices seemed distant. And then, silence. Not just the quiet of the night, but something deeper. The kind of silence where even the wind refused to move. That's when he heard it. A faint sound. A scratching. Coming from somewhere ahead. Coming from beneath the ground. Jake stopped, his breath hitching in his throat. His heart pounded in his chest. He told himself it was just his imagination, just an animal, maybe a raccoon digging through the dirt. But then, it happened again. Louder, more desperate. Jake swallowed hard, gripping his flashlight tighter. He took a hesitant step forward, his boots crunching against the dry leaves. He followed the sound, toward the grave. The one with no name, the one with the cracked tombstone. And as he got closer, the scratching grew louder. Jake's footsteps crunched against the brittle leaves and loose gravel as he moved deeper into the cemetery. His breath came out in small, misty puffs in the cold air. The moon overhead flickered between shifting clouds, casting long, twisted shadows across the gravestones. His phone flashlight barely cut through the darkness, a single beam against the void. The deeper he walked, the more the night swallowed the world around him. The old graves stood like silent sentinels, their headstones cracked and leaning. Some had names carved so deep into the stone that they had faded with time. Others were nameless, forgotten by the world, their stories buried with them. And then, he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it. Scritch, scritch, scritch! Jake stopped. His breath caught in his throat as his ears strained against the silence. The wind had died down. The usual night sounds, crickets, rustling leaves, distant cars, gone, but that sound remained. Scritch, scritch, a slow, deliberate scratching, like fingernails against wood. Jake swallowed hard, telling himself it was just an animal. A raccoon maybe, or a fox burrowing in the ground. But then, it got louder, more frantic, more desperate. It wasn't the rustling of an animal, it wasn't the shifting of tree roots. It was coming from beneath the ground. Jake's fingers tightened around his phone. His flashlight trembled slightly in his grip as he turned, scanning the graves around him. The sound was pulling him forward, toward one grave. A grave different from the rest. There was no name carved into its surface. No date, no flowers left by loved ones. Just a single cracked tombstone, leaning at an unnatural angle as if the earth itself had tried to swallow it. Jake stepped closer. The scratching sound grew even louder. Fingernails against wood. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to turn back. He wanted to tell himself this was all in his head. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and tonight, it would cost him. Jake stood frozen, staring at the nameless grave. His breath was uneven, his pulse hammering against his ribs. The air around him felt heavy, like the weight of something unseen pressing down on his shoulders. The scratching sound hadn't stopped. If anything, it was growing more desperate. A chill ran down his spine. His mind raced through the possibilities. Could it be an animal trapped underground? A trick played by his friends? He turned, glancing back toward the cemetery gate where his friends were supposed to be waiting. But the mist had thickened and the entrance seemed farther than before. The darkness stretched endlessly and then scritch, scritch, scritch. His stomach twisted. Something was in there and it wanted out. Jake swallowed hard. Every logical part of his mind told him to walk away, to turn around, leave the cemetery, and never look back. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. His hands moved before his mind could stop them. He dropped to his knees and hesitated for only a second before digging. The soil was looser than he expected, too loose, like someone had already tried to claw their way out from beneath. With each handful of dirt he pulled away, the scratching grew louder, faster, more frantic. Jake's breathing turned shallow. The cold earth clung to his fingers, damp and heavy. The deeper he dug, the more he felt like he was breaking some unspoken rule. And then, everything went silent. The wind stopped. The trees stood still. Not even his own breath made a sound. Just stillness. Jake froze. His fingers curled in the damp soil. His pulse pounded in his ears. Then the ground shifted beneath him. A deep guttural crack split through the silence like wood splintering under pressure. Jake stumbled back, his hands shaking. His breath hitched as the dirt trembled. Something was moving. Something was pushing up from beneath. And before Jake could even process what was happening, the earth caved in, and from the darkness below, something reached for him. Jake is in a damp cemetery. For a second, everything was still. Jake sat frozen in the damp soil, his breath ragged, his mind screaming at him to run, but his body wouldn't move. His eyes locked onto the dark, gaping hole in the earth, a pit of blackness where something had been buried. Then, a hand shot out. It wasn't human, not anymore. Pale, rotting flesh clung to thin, bony fingers. The skin was stretched tight, splitting in places, revealing blackened veins beneath. Dirt crumbled from its knuckles as it lunged for Jake's wrist, and before he could react, it grabbed him. The touch was ice cold, colder than death. Jake screamed, instinctively yanking his arm back. But the grip tightened, unnaturally strong. The fingers dug into his skin, sending a searing chill through his veins. He gasped, pulling with everything he had, but the hand wouldn't let go. And then, it moved. Not just the hand, something beneath the dirt was rising. Jake's stomach twisted as the ground shifted again, the hole widening, crumbling away as something pulled itself up. Through the shifting shadows, a face emerged, a face that shouldn't be alive. Its eyes were sunken, clouded, yet filled with something that wasn't quite death. Its skin, once human, now rotted and peeling. Its lips, dry and cracked, barely moved as a sound. A whisper scraped through the air like rusted metal. "Help me!" Jake's breath hitched. His chest tightened as the corpse, clawed its way higher, its voice rasping. "I was never meant to die." Jake's entire body went cold. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. This wasn't a ghost story. This wasn't a legend. This thing, whatever it was real. And it wasn't dead. Not completely. And now, it wanted out. Jake yanked his arm with everything he had. For a moment, the cold, rotting fingers refused to let go. They clung to him like iron chains, tightening as if they were trying to pull him into the grave. But then, with one final desperate jerk, he broke free. He fell backward, scrambling away on all fours, his chest heaving, his wrist burning from where the thing had gripped him. The cold still lingered in his veins, spreading like frostbite, but he had no time to think, because it was still moving. The figure dragged itself out of the grave, inch by inch. Its skeletal fingers clawed at the loose soil, pulling its decayed body free from the dirt that had imprisoned it. Its jaw unhinged, as if trying to speak, trying to scream. But Jake wasn't going to wait to find out what it wanted. He turned and ran. His legs burned, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he didn't dare look back. The only thing that mattered was getting out. But the cemetery had changed. The narrow dirt paths he had walked before, the ones leading back to the gate, were gone. In their place, the graves stretched endlessly, twisting in unnatural ways. Jake sprinted left, only to end up at the same nameless grave. He ran right, but found himself standing before it again. It was as if the cemetery itself was toying with him, trapping him. A chilling whisper slithered through the night air. At first it was faint like the wind through dead leaves, but then the whispers grew louder. They were saying his name, Jake. His breath hitched. It was his friends, or at least, it sounded like them. He turned, desperate, scanning the cemetery for a sign of them. Somewhere in the distance, past the mist and the endless gravestones, he saw shadows, figures standing just beyond his reach. "Jake! Over here!" Their voices echoed, distorted, wrong, like a recording played back at the wrong speed. Something inside him screamed not to trust it. And then he saw it. Among the graves, standing completely still, a shadowy figure. It was tall, draped in a tattered black cloak, its face hidden in the void beneath its hood. But Jake could feel its grin, wide, amused, watching. It had been watching the entire time. Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. He needed to move. He needed to get out, now. But the moment he took a step, the figure tilted its head, and suddenly, the ground beneath Jake's feet shifted. A low, guttural laugh rippled through the night, and behind him, the sound of something crawling, getting closer. Jake's time was running out. Jake's breath came in shallow gasps. His legs burned. His body screamed at him to keep running, but where? Every path led him back to the same grave. The crawling corpse was closer now. Its decayed fingers scraped against the earth, pulling itself toward him, its hollow eyes burned with something beyond death. And then the whispering started again, not from his friends, not from the corpse, but from the wind. It snaked through the graves like a voice from the past, a story, a legend. Jake's mind spun as realization crashed into him. Blackwood Cemetery, the unmarked grave, the whispers at night. He had heard it before, the old story. The man who was buried alive. Years ago, in this very town, a man named Victor Sallow was accused of a crime he didn't commit. The townspeople were afraid of him. They said he was a monster, a killer, a man who had cheated death before. And so, one night, they buried him alive. Not with a funeral, not with a coffin. They just dug a hole, threw him in, and buried him deep. Victor screamed, clawed, pounded against the dirt above him. No one listened, no one cared. And the town went on, believing they had buried the evil that haunted them. But he never died. For days, maybe even weeks, he fought against the suffocating soil. He clawed until his fingernails peeled away. He scratched until his bones were exposed. He screamed until there was no breath left in his lungs. And then, he stopped. But something else, something darker, took his place. The shadow that watches. Jake's hands trembled as his mind pieced it together. The cloaked figure standing in the cemetery, the one that had been watching, waiting, it was the one that kept him buried. A curse, a punishment. Victor Sallow was never meant to die, but he wasn't allowed to live either. The thing crawling toward him wasn't just a corpse, it was vengeance. It was a nightmare that had been waiting for someone to set it free. And Jake, by disturbing the grave, by digging into the earth, had just given it the chance. Jake realizes he has made a terrible mistake. Jake's mind raced. The truth about the grave was horrifying enough, but now he had to survive it. Victor's corpse was almost free. The dirt around the grave churned like something was breathing beneath it. His skeletal fingers clawed at the earth, his hollow eyes locked onto Jake, a silent, rage-filled hunger burning inside them. Jake backed away, scanning the graves. He needed something, anything to stop this. And then, his eyes landed on it. A shovel, old, rusted, half buried beneath the roots of a nearby gravestone. His only chance. Jake dove for it, wrapping his fingers around the cold metal handle. The second he lifted it, Victor let out a scream, a sound so unnatural, so filled with agony and fury, that the very air around Jake seemed to shake. The wind died, the graves around him groaned, and the shadowy figure watched. It didn't move, it didn't interfere, it simply stood there, observing, like this was a test Jake wasn't sure he could win. Jake didn't hesitate. He ran to the grave, lifted the shovel high above his head, and slammed it down. The first pile of dirt fell onto Victor's writhing body. Victor shrieked, his decayed hands lashed out, grabbing at the edges of the grave, pulling himself up. But Jake didn't stop. Another scoop of dirt. Another, and another. Victor's screams grew more frantic. The ground beneath Jake trembled. Something was resisting, as if the cemetery itself was fighting to keep the grave open. But Jake kept going. His arms burned, his chest heaved, his heart pounded like a drum. More dirt, more weight, more burial. Victor clawed at the air, his mouth stretching into a voiceless wail, and then his body began to sink, like the earth itself was swallowing him. Jake didn't stop until the grave was completely filled, until there was nothing left but silent, undisturbed dirt. Jake stumbled back, gasping, his hands were shaking, covered in dirt. The wind howled back to life. The cemetery, so twisted, so unnatural before, seemed calmer. But the shadowy figure was still there, still watching. For a moment, Jake thought it might come for him next, but instead, It simply tilted its head. And then, it vanished. Dissolving into the night like smoke. The test was over. Jake had passed. But as he turned to run, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching. The background fades to an eerie calm. Then, a faint sound of scratching. Cut to black. Jake ran. His feet pounded against the cemetery's dirt paths as if every step was dragging him further away from the nightmare. Yet somehow, he couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare was still close. His lungs burned, his heart raced with adrenaline, but every time he glanced over his shoulder, the cemetery stood still and silent. The shadow had gone. And yet something inside him whispered, "It's not over." When Jake finally reached the entrance, his friends were standing there waiting for him, laughing. "That took you long enough," one of them said, grinning. Jake didn't respond. His body was shaking, his hands trembling at his sides. His face was pale, drained of color. He looked like a man who had seen death itself and survived, but not without paying a price. His friends, still unaware of what had happened, continued to laugh and joke. "Man, you look like you've seen a ghost!" But Jake didn't laugh. He couldn't. He didn't say a word. It wasn't because he was scared. No, it was something far worse. Something that gnawed at his very core. He couldn't explain it to them. They wouldn't understand. The wind outside howled as Jake lay in his bed that night. His body was exhausted, but his mind, it wouldn't let him sleep. He stared at the ceiling, his thoughts racing, reliving every second of that horrible encounter. The image of the rotting corpse, the sound of the grave shifting beneath him, Victor's eyes burning with rage, the shadow that watched him, the curse that had been lifted only to be passed on to him. It was all too much. He closed his eyes, trying to block it out, but then, a sound, a faint scratching. At first he thought it was just the house settling, maybe a mouse. But then the scratching came again, louder. His breath caught in his throat. No, it couldn't be, not after everything. He pulled the covers tight over his body, trying to convince himself it was just a dream. But the sound, it was real. The scratching grew more frantic. It was coming from beneath the bed. Jake couldn't help it. His head turned, his eyes locked on the dark space beneath his bed. There, in the darkness, he could see nothing. Nothing but the shadow of the room, and the faintest outline of the floorboards. But the scratching didn't stop. And then, it came. A voice, a whisper, cold, cracked, hoarse. "You buried me once." Jake's breath caught in his chest, his pulse raced, but the voice wasn't done. Victor's voice echoed, "But I will rise again." The last breath. The room felt colder, the air heavier, the scratching, the whisper. They were real. Jake's body froze, his blood turning to ice. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. He simply lay there, the terror sinking deeper into his bones. Then, the bed creaked, slowly, as if something heavy was crawling underneath. Jake's heart pounded in his ears, but he couldn't look. He couldn't bear to see what was coming. He had done everything to stop it, had buried the curse, the nightmare, deep into the earth. But it wasn't enough. The room is silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that feels wrong. The kind that makes your skin crawl, as if something unseen is lurking just beyond the darkness. Jake lies in his bed, his body stiff with fear. His breathing is shallow, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. But the scratching, it hasn't stopped. It has only grown louder, more frantic, more desperate. The floor beneath his bed creaks ever so slightly, the sound barely perceptible, except to Jake, whose every sense is screaming that something is there. Something is waiting. Something is watching. Then, a low, raspy whisper slithers through the darkness. "You buried me once, but I will rise again." Jake's breath catches. A cold sweat drips down his forehead. His hands tremble as he grips the sheets, as if they could protect him from whatever is beneath him. Then, the bed jolts. Not a little, not a creak, a violent shake, as if something beneath him is pushing against the mattress. Jake's body goes rigid. The scratching turns into a clawing, a relentless, hungry scratching. The wood groans under the pressure. And then, a hand. A rotting, bone-thin hand. Its fingers curled in decay, pushes through the wooden floor. The hand grips the floor, its fingers twitching, pressing against the wood. Another hand emerges, clawing its way through. The sound of splintering wood echoes in the room, followed by a low, unnatural moan. Jake's breath comes in shallow gasps. His eyes are wide, paralyzed in pure terror. Then, the fingers move. They drag across the wooden floor, slow and deliberate. The sound is sharp, grating, unnatural. Something is crawling out. The camera lingers on the rotting fingers for just a moment longer. Then, cut to black. Some stories end with the rising of the sun, but not this one. Jake thought he had escaped. He thought he had survived. But some things never truly die. That grave should have remained undisturbed. That whisper should have never been heard. Now something knows his name. Something followed him home. And as long as it lingers in the shadows, scratching, waiting, Jake will never be free. Because some graves are not just resting places. They are cages. And when you open them, you can never be sure what will come out. Jake's story isn't just about a graveyard dare gone wrong, it's a warning. A warning about what happens when we let curiosity override fear. A warning that some spirits refuse to stay buried. And worst of all, a warning that the dead are never truly alone. As long as we keep listening, keep digging, keep disturbing what should remain untouched, the scratching will never stop.